The scent hit me first. Unfamiliar cologne lingering in my living room, a place where only my own aftershave should have marked the air. I froze in the doorway, luggage still in hand, the pleasant anticipation of returning home after a week away evaporating instantly. "Madison?" I called out, my voice echoing through our spacious home. "I'm back." I heard rustling from the kitchen, followed by the hurried closing of a drawer. When Madison appeared in the hallway, her smile seemed stretched across her face, not quite reaching her eyes. "Ethan, you're early." She approached for a quick hug, her body stiff against mine. "I thought your flight wasn't until 7. Caught an earlier connection." I studied her face. Her cheeks were flushed, hair slightly disheveled. "Everything okay?" "Of course," she said, stepping back quickly. "Just surprised." I was about to jump in the shower. I wheeled my suitcase into the living room, noticing details that felt out of place. 3 expensive candles I'd never seen before flickered on the coffee table. An open bottle of Chateau Margaux, a wine we never splurged on, stood next to 2 half-empty glasses. One lipstick stained, the other clean. "Having a solo celebration?" I asked, gesturing toward the wine. Madison's eyes flashed with something, panic? Before she composed herself. "Just treating myself. The Anderson case closed today. Big win." "Congratulations," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You deserve it." I moved toward the kitchen, Madison following a step behind. On the dining table, I saw the remains of what was clearly a meal for 2. 2 plates with remnants of pasta, 2 cloth napkins, 2 sets of silverware. "Hungry?" Madison asked, quickly gathering the plates. "I can heat something up for you." "You had company for lunch?" I kept my tone casual. "Oh no." She laughed nervously. "Just hadn't cleaned up from yesterday. You know how I am with dishes when you're gone." But I knew Madison never left dishes overnight. It was one of her immovable house rules. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She lunged for it, turning away as she read the message. When she faced me again, her complexion had paled considerably. "I'm so sorry, but I need to run into the office," she said, already moving toward the bedroom. "Emergency partners meeting about the Westridge merger. Might be a few hours." "Now. It's almost 8. Corporate law waits for no one," she called over her shoulder with forced lightness. "Help yourself to dinner. There's leftover takeout in the fridge." As I heard her rummaging through the closet, I began clearing the table, trying to quiet the alarm bells ringing in my head. When I lifted one of the napkins, something metallic glinted underneath. I picked it up, a man's cufflink, silver with an onyx inlay. Definitely not mine. I slipped it into my pocket just as Madison returned, now in a pressed blazer, hair brushed smooth. "Don't wait up," she said, grabbing her keys. She kissed my cheek quickly, leaving behind the scent of hastily applied perfume attempting to mask something else. The front door closed and I heard her car start in the driveway. Only then did I allow myself to sink into a dining chair, the cufflink heavy in my pocket. 2 weeks ago, after a string of break-ins in our neighborhood, I'd installed a comprehensive security system. Cameras covering every entrance and most common areas. Madison had complained about the invasion of privacy, but eventually relented. Now I understood her reluctance. I retrieved my laptop and accessed the security footage. The interface showed several days of recordings. I scrolled back to 3 days ago when I was in Chicago for meetings. There she was, Madison, coming through the front door at 6:15 in the evening. But not alone. A tall, athletic man with dark hair followed, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. They were laughing, comfortable with each other. She reached up to straighten his tie before leading him to the living room, directly out of camera range. I fast-forwarded through hours of footage, watching them eventually emerge from the hallway leading to our bedroom. The man left at midnight, Madison kissing him deeply at the door. The same scene repeated with slight variations on 2 more evenings. I switched to yesterday's footage. There they were again, entering together, his arms laden with grocery bags. They cooked together in our kitchen, drank wine, slow danced between the island and refrigerator. Then they moved to our sofa, the one where I was now sitting, and began tearing at each other's clothes. I closed the laptop, unable to watch more. The truth crashed down around me like broken glass. My wife of 6 years was having an affair in our home, in our bed, while I traveled for the job that paid for it all. And she thought I had no idea. I spent that night on the couch, unable to face our bed knowing what had happened there. When Madison returned near midnight, I pretended to be asleep, watching through barely open eyes as she tiptoed past me. The whispered phone conversation she had in the kitchen reached my ears in fragments. "He's home. No, he doesn't suspect anything. Just a few more weeks. My instinct screamed to confront her, to demand answers, to unleash the storm of betrayal raging inside me. But the strategic part of my brain, the part that had made me successful in corporate negotiations, held me back. I needed more information. I needed to understand the full scope of her deception. The next morning I left for work early, kissing Madison's cheek as if nothing had changed. As if my world hadn't collapsed around me. As if the woman I'd shared 6 years with hadn't become a stranger overnight. "I've got a late meeting tonight," I lied. "Don't wait up." She seemed relieved. "No problem. I've got plenty of briefs to review anyway." I drove around the corner and parked, waiting until I saw her leave for work. Then I returned home and began my investigation. First, I installed monitoring software on our shared home computer. Nothing malicious, just something that would record browsing history and keystrokes. Unethical? Perhaps. But so was adultery. Next, I logged into our phone account. Madison and I shared a family plan, making it easy to review her call history. One number appeared dozens of times over the past 3 months, often with calls lasting 20 or 30 minutes. I didn't recognize it. A quick Google search revealed it belonged to Elite Fitness, an upscale gym across town. Madison had never mentioned joining a new fitness club. Her usual yoga studio was just down the street from our house. Our shared digital calendar showed recurring appointments, training with C. Always on Tuesdays and Thursdays, always when I was scheduled to be in the office all day. I dug deeper into our finances. Our joint account showed regular withdrawals of $200 to $300 every week for the past several months. Madison had always handled our household budget, so I hadn't noticed the pattern until now. Credit card statements revealed more. Dinner charges at expensive restaurants on nights I was traveling. Hotel rooms charged and then refunded, as if they'd been booked then canceled. Or perhaps charged to the wrong card by mistake. "Who are you, C?" I muttered, printing relevant pages and organizing them in a folder. That afternoon, I called in sick to work and parked outside Madison's law firm. At 5:30, she emerged from the building and walked to her car. Instead of heading home, she drove across town to a sleek glass building with Elite Fitness emblazoned on its facade. I waited in my car, hat pulled low, sunglasses on despite the fading daylight. An hour later, Madison exited alongside a tall, athletic man, the same one from the security footage. They stood close, his hand brushing her hair from her face in an intimate gesture that made my stomach turn. I snapped several photos with my phone as they walked to his car, a black BMW with custom plates reading Fittlf. They kissed before parting ways. The next day, I contacted a private investigator recommended by a colleague who'd gone through his own divorce nightmare. The PI was expensive but discreet. "I need background on someone," I explained. "A fitness club owner who may be involved with my wife." 3 days later, the PI's report arrived in my encrypted email. His name was Caleb Morgan, owner of Elite Fitness and 3 other gyms across the state. Divorced twice. Known in social circles as a womanizer who targeted wealthy married women. The report included photos of Madison and Caleb viewing apartments together, meeting with what appeared to be a real estate agent. They visited 3 properties in the past month, the PI wrote. All high-end condos in the downtown area. That evening, while Madison was allegedly working late, I searched our home methodically. In her lingerie drawer, beneath silk and lace, I found a brochure from a divorce law firm. Certain passages about asset division were highlighted in yellow. One paragraph caught my eye. In no-fault divorce states, evidence of adultery may not impact asset division. However, evidence of financial misconduct, such as hiding assets or spending marital funds on extramarital affairs, can significantly influence the court's decision. In the margin, Madison had written, "Ensure no records of C on joint accounts." I photographed everything, replaced it exactly as I'd found it, and quietly closed the drawer. My wife wasn't just having an affair. She was planning to leave me, but only after ensuring she got the maximum financial benefit. The woman I'd loved, trusted, built a life with, was systematically preparing to destroy me. That night, sleeping in the guest room with the door locked, I made a decision. If Madison wanted war, I would be prepared. Not with anger or accusations, but with evidence and strategy. Let her think I remained oblivious. Let her believe her plan was working perfectly. I would be ready when the time came to reveal that I knew everything. The realization that Madison wasn't just cheating but planning to financially devastate me hit like a physical blow. For 2 days, I moved through our home like a ghost, maintaining the facade of normality while my mind raced with contingency plans. Madison barely noticed my distraction, so consumed was she with her secret life. On the third morning I called an attorney, not one from the same firm whose brochure Madison had hidden, but a sharp-eyed woman recommended by my company's legal department. I scheduled an appointment during my lunch break. "I need to understand my options," I told the attorney, Janet Perkins, without revealing all the details. Hypothetically, if my marriage were to end. Janet's office was sparse but elegant, much like the woman herself. She listened without judgment as I outlined the bare facts. 6-year marriage, no children, substantial assets including a house, investments and retirement accounts. "What you need to know," Janet said, peering at me over reading glasses, "is that in this state, marital assets are typically divided equally regardless of fault. Adultery may be personally devastating, but legally? It rarely impacts the financial settlement." My heart sank. So even if one spouse betrays the other, the courts consider it an emotional matter, not a financial one. She leaned forward. "However, there are exceptions. Financial misconduct during the marriage, hiding assets, wasting marital funds on an affair, fraudulent transfers. Those can influence division." I nodded slowly. "And the family home?" "That depends on when and how it was acquired. It was purchased by my parents and gifted to us as a wedding present," I explained. "The deed was put in my name alone at their insistence, though Madison and I have always treated it as joint property." Janet's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's potentially significant. Property acquired by gift to one spouse, even during marriage, can sometimes be considered separate property." I left with a clearer understanding of what I was facing, and what I needed to do. That afternoon, I visited a different bank across town and opened a personal account. Over the next 2 weeks, I gradually transferred small amounts from our joint savings. Nothing that would trigger Madison's suspicion, but enough to ensure I wouldn't be left destitute if she emptied our accounts. I called my insurance company and changed the beneficiaries on my life insurance policy from Madison to my sister's children. Another call to our investment advisor confirmed what I suspected. Madison had been inquiring about liquidation procedures for our joint investments. Working methodically, I gathered copies of all important financial documents: tax returns, property deeds, retirement statements, banking records. I stored digital copies in an encrypted cloud account and physical copies in a safe deposit box at my new bank. The most delicate task was yet to come. While Madison was at training with Caleb one Thursday, I hired a home inspector under the guise of a routine check for our insurance. The real purpose was to thoroughly document the condition of our house, and to search for anything Madison might have hidden. The inspector, a retired building contractor named Frank, was thorough and discreet. In the master bedroom, his moisture meter detected an anomaly in the wall near the air vent. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked, already unscrewing the vent cover. Inside the duct, wrapped in plastic, was a manila envelope. I thanked Frank for his thoroughness and slipped him an extra $100 for his discretion. That night, after Madison had gone to bed, I examined the envelope's contents in my home office. Inside was a completed but unfiled divorce petition. Madison was claiming irreconcilable differences and requesting 75% of our assets based on emotional distress and financial contributions to the marriage. The petition contained outright lies, allegations that I had been emotionally abusive, that I had hidden assets from her, that I had forced her to work while spending our money frivolously. Each false accusation was crafted to paint me as a villain who deserved to be financially punished. Attached to the petition were handwritten notes on strategies for maximizing her claim, emphasis on ease work absences, document all household contributions, suggest financial impropriety without specific accusations. I photographed every page, then carefully returned the envelope to its hiding place. My hands were shaking, not with anger, but with cold determination. Madison wasn't just planning to leave, she was orchestrating my destruction. The next day, I visited my brother's home and stored copies of all my documentation in his gun safe. If Madison went looking for my records, she wouldn't find them. "You okay?" my brother asked, concern etched on his face. "You seem different." I managed a tight smile. "Just taking care of some important paperwork." That night, as Madison and I sat through another silent dinner, our new normal, she glanced up from her phone and asked, "Everything all right at work? You've been quiet lately." "Never better," I replied, raising my glass in a mock toast. "Just focused on the future." She smiled, clearly relieved by my apparent obliviousness. If only she knew how focused I truly was. After weeks of gathering evidence, documenting Madison's deception, and securing my financial position, I was ready. The weight of her betrayal had solidified into a cold resolve. I wouldn't be caught off guard when she finally pulled the trigger. I would be the one to make the first move. On a Friday evening, I tracked Madison's phone to Elite Fitness. According to her, she was working late on a complicated merger agreement. According to her location data, she was with Caleb. I dressed in dark jeans and a black button-down, clothes that made me look confident but not like I was trying too hard. I didn't want to appear as the disheveled, desperate husband when I finally confronted them. The gym was located in a trendy part of downtown, all glass and steel with blue accent lighting. In the parking lot, I easily spotted Caleb's black BMW with the vanity plates. I parked 2 spaces away and waited. At 9:45, the gym's front doors opened. Madison emerged laughing, her gym bag slung over her shoulder, though her perfectly styled hair suggested she hadn't done much actual exercising. Caleb followed close behind, his arm wrapped possessively around her waist. I quietly took out my phone and snapped several photos as they walked toward his car. Madison stopped to say something and Caleb bent down to kiss her. Not a quick peck, but a deep, lingering kiss meant for private spaces, not parking lots. I stepped out of my car. "Lovely evening, isn't it?" I called out, my voice steady despite the hammering in my chest. Madison froze. Even from 20 feet away, I could see the color drain from her face. She didn't look guilty, she looked annoyed, as if I'd interrupted an important business meeting. "Ethan." My name fell from her lips like a dead weight. "What are you doing here?" I approached them slowly, hands in my pockets, casual as if bumping into old friends. "I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd see what keeps you so busy during your late-night work sessions." Caleb didn't remove his arm from Madison's waist. Instead, he pulled her closer, staring me down with a smug confidence that made my teeth clench. "You must be the husband," he said, extending his free hand. "Caleb Morgan. I've heard so much about you." I ignored his hand. "Funny, I've heard nothing about you. At least, not from my wife." Madison stepped between us, her lawyer persona taking over. "Ethan, this isn't the place. Let me explain." "Explain what?" I gestured between them. "That you've been sleeping with your personal trainer while I've been working 60-hour weeks to support our lifestyle? That you've been bringing him into our home, our bed?" Her eyes widened. "How did you know?" I finished for her. "Security cameras, Madison. The ones I installed after the Hendersons were robbed. The ones you complained about." Caleb chuckled, an arrogant sound that made my blood boil. "Look man, these things happen. Marriages fall apart. Madison and I have something special." "Special enough to view downtown condos together?" I asked, watching Madison's reaction carefully. "Special enough to draft divorce papers claiming I was emotionally abusive?" Madison's composure cracked. "You went through my things?" "I went through our vent system, where you hid your plans to take 75% of our assets." I turned to Caleb. "Did she tell you the house is solely in my name? A wedding gift from my parents. Not marital property." Caleb's arm dropped from Madison's waist. "Madison said the house was joint property." "Madison says a lot of things." I pulled out my phone and showed them a photo of the divorce petition I'd found. "She also says I'm an uncaring workaholic who deserves to be financially ruined." Interesting perspective from someone who's been spending our money on hotel rooms with her lover. Madison stepped toward me, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You had no right to spy on me. And you had no right to cheat, lie, and plan to destroy me." I kept my voice even, refusing to match her anger. "But here we are." Caleb cleared his throat. "Maybe we should discuss this another time." His confident facade was beginning to crack. He glanced at his watch. "I have an early client tomorrow." "Running already?" I asked. "And here I thought you were all about endurance." Madison grabbed my arm. "Ethan, please. Let's go home and talk about this like adults." I gently removed her hand. "There's nothing to discuss. I filed for divorce this morning." I turned to Caleb. "You should know she's been telling her divorce attorney that you're just a fling to hurt me. That once the settlement is final, she plans to move to California. Alone." Caleb's expression shifted. "What? Madison, is that true?" Madison's eyes darted between us. "Of course not. He's making that up." I shrugged. "Check her drafts folder on her Gmail account. The one she accesses on our home computer. Very detailed plans." That part was a bluff. I had no idea if such an email existed. But the panic in Madison's eyes told me I'd struck something close to truth. "This isn't over," Madison hissed. "You're right," I agreed, turning to walk back to my car. "But it's no longer on your terms." As I drove away, I watched them in my rearview mirror, no longer a united front, but two people suddenly wary of each other. Phase 1 complete. I was halfway to my car when I heard rapid footsteps behind me. Madison had broken away from Caleb and was pursuing me across the parking lot, her face contorted with anger. "You don't get to just walk away after dropping a bomb like that," she hissed, grabbing my arm. "You've been spying on me? Installing secret cameras in our home." I turned to face her, maintaining the calm I'd practiced for weeks. "They weren't secret, Madison. I told you about them the day they were installed. You signed the security contract." Her strategy shifted instantly, her eyes softening as she adopted a wounded expression. "Ethan, you're not being fair. Our marriage has been struggling for years. You're always working, always traveling. I was lonely. Lonely enough to plan how to take 75% of our assets?" I asked quietly. "Lonely enough to falsely accuse me of emotional abuse in legal documents?" Caleb approached cautiously, hovering a few feet away. The confidence he'd displayed earlier had dimmed considerably. "Look," he interjected, "this is clearly between you two. Maybe I should." "Stay right where you are," I said without looking at him. "You've been a central figure in the destruction of my marriage. You've earned your place in this conversation." Madison's expression hardened again. "You have no right to order him around. And you had no right to go through my private papers." "Private papers hidden in our ventilation system?" I shook my head. "If you're going to accuse someone of being abusive and controlling in a legal document, you might want to make sure they don't find it before you file." Caleb shifted uncomfortably. "Madison, you never mentioned anything about abuse allegations." "Because there weren't any." She snapped at him before turning back to me. "That was just legal strategy. My attorney suggested it might help with the settlement." "So you admit to planning false accusations to improve your financial position?" I pulled out my phone and hit stop on the recording app. "Thank you for clarifying that." Madison's face paled. "You were recording me? That's illegal." "Actually, in this state, single-party consent is all that's required." I consented. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. "Just like I consented to our security company sending me alerts whenever someone entered our home while the system showed I was away." "You've been watching me the whole time," she whispered, realization dawning. "Not actively. But I have timestamps, entry and exit logs, and yes, some video footage that clearly shows your activities in our home." I glanced at Caleb. "Including your discussions about finding an apartment together and your plans for after the divorce." Caleb stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "Madison, you told me you were going to split everything 50-50 and be done with it. You said you weren't out to hurt him." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what she told you?" "Interesting, considering the petition I found requests 75% of all assets, full ownership of our investment portfolio, and ongoing alimony." "That's not," Madison began, but Caleb cut her off. "What about what you told me last week? About us moving in together once this was over?" His voice had an edge to it now. "Was that just a line too?" Madison looked trapped between us. "Caleb, he's trying to turn you against me. Can't you see that?" I laughed softly. "I don't need to turn anyone against you, Madison. Your own actions are doing that just fine." I turned to leave again. "Your things will be packed and waiting by the front door when you get home. I've arranged for a security guard to ensure you take only what belongs to you. You can't kick me out of my own house." Her voice rose, drawing attention from a couple walking toward the gym. "My house," I corrected. "As confirmed by the property records I reviewed with my attorney yesterday. You have no legal claim to it." "This isn't over," she threatened, her composed lawyer persona completely abandoned now. "I'll fight you for everything." "With what evidence?" I asked. "Your false abuse claims? Your hidden financial maneuvers that my attorney now has documented? Your affair conducted in our marital home, using funds from our joint accounts." Caleb stepped back, raising his hands. "I was told your marriage was already over in all but paperwork. That you two were already separated." "Yet another lie," I said, finally looking directly at him. "Though not the biggest one, I suspect." Madison turned on him. "Shut up, Caleb. You're not helping." "Am I supposed to be helping?" he asked, a new wariness in his voice. "Because it sounds like you've been playing both of us." I used their distraction to walk the remaining distance to my car. As I opened the door, I heard Madison's voice rise again, but this time directed at Caleb. "You promised me you'd stand by me through this. You said we were building something real." His response was too quiet to hear, but his body language, stepping back, hands in pockets, spoke volumes. As I drove away, I watched them in my rearview mirror, standing feet apart now, gesturing angrily at each other. The united front had crumbled faster than I'd anticipated. My phone buzzed with a text from my attorney, temporary restraining order granted. She cannot enter property without escort. Process server ready when you give word. Phase 2 complete. Now for the most difficult part, rebuilding my life from the ashes of what I thought we had. I arrived home to find a woman sitting on my front steps, hunched forward with her face buried in her hands. For a moment, I thought Madison had somehow beaten me here, but as I approached, the woman looked up. It was Rebecca, Madison's younger sister. My guard immediately went up. Rebecca and I had always gotten along well, but her loyalty to Madison was unwavering. If she was here, it couldn't be good. "Rebecca," I said cautiously, remaining by my car. "This is a surprise." She stood, wiping at her eyes. "Can we talk, Ethan? Please? Inside." I hesitated. "If Madison sent you." "She didn't," Rebecca cut in. "She has no idea I'm here. That's why I came now while I knew she was out." Something in her voice, a mixture of shame and determination, made me believe her. I nodded toward the door. "Come in then." Inside, Rebecca declined my offer of coffee or wine, sitting rigidly on the edge of the sofa. I took the armchair across from her, giving her space. "I know about Madison and Caleb," she blurted out. "I've known for months." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "And you didn't think I deserved to know my wife was cheating on me?" Rebecca's face crumpled. "I should have told you. God, I wanted to. But she's my sister and I." She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. "That's not an excuse. I was a coward and I'm sorry. Why are you here now?" She reached into her bag and pulled out a tablet. "Because of these. Madison has been emailing me about her plans. Bragging about them, actually. I can't be part of this anymore." She handed me the tablet. On the screen was an email thread between Madison and Rebecca, spanning months. I scrolled through, my hands growing increasingly unsteady. "I've got him exactly where I want him," one message read. "He's so focused on work he doesn't even notice when I'm gone for hours. By the time I file, I'll have everything set up to take him for every cent." Another, "Caleb's perfect for now. He knows exactly what to say to make me feel good. And he's eager to help me plan how to maximize what I get from Ethan. After that, well, we'll see. And most recently, the lawyer says we can push for way more than half. Ethan's so passive he'll probably just give in to avoid a fight. I plan to squeeze out every last drop before I'm done." I set the tablet down, feeling strangely calm. "Why show me these? She's your sister." Rebecca's eyes flashed with anger. "Because this isn't the first time. Madison has been doing this her whole life, manipulating people, using them, discarding them when she's done. She did it to our parents, draining their savings for her law school while telling them I wasn't worth investing in." She leaned forward. "When our father was dying, she convinced him to change his will to favor her, promising she'd take care of me. I got $5,000. She got the rest, nearly $200,000. I stared at her, seeing pieces fall into place. I never knew. No one does. Madison is careful about her image." Rebecca took a deep breath. "But this time it's different. The way she talks about you, about your marriage, it's cold. Calculated. She's planning to destroy you publicly, Ethan. Not just take your money." I thought about the divorce petition hidden in our vent. "She's accusing me of emotional abuse." Rebecca nodded grimly. "That's just the beginning. She's told people you've been controlling, that you monitor her spending and isolate her from friends. None of it's true, but she's building a narrative." "Why would she do this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Because it's easier to justify taking everything if you're fleeing an abuser." Rebecca's voice was bitter. "And it ensures people take her side. No one questions the victim." She reached for the tablet again, pulling up another email. "There's more. Did you know Caleb has a criminal record?" I sat up straighter. "No. Fraud charges 3 years ago. He settled out of court, but he's been involved in some shady investment schemes." She turned the tablet to show me a mugshot. "Madison knows. She thinks it makes him edgy and resourceful. What she really means is he knows how to help her hide assets." For several minutes, we sat in silence as I processed everything. Finally, Rebecca spoke again, her voice quiet but determined. "I'll testify if you need me to. About the emails, about what she said to me about her character. I can't fix what I've done by keeping silent, but I can help make sure she doesn't ruin you." "She'll never forgive you," I warned. Rebecca smiled sadly. "I know. But I won't forgive myself if I stay silent now. I studied her face, looking for any sign of deception, any hint that this might be an elaborate trap set by Madison. All I saw was resolve and lingering guilt. "Thank you," I said finally. "This helps more than you know." "There's one more thing," Rebecca said, lowering her voice. "Caleb's not who he seems either. His first wife left after he drained their accounts. His second marriage lasted 8 months before he was caught cheating with multiple clients. Madison doesn't know I've researched him." I nodded slowly, a plan forming. "Would you be willing to tell her?" Rebecca considered this. "You don't want to tell her yourself?" "I think it would be more effective coming from someone she trusts." I paused. "Or trusted." "She won't believe me at first." "No," I agreed. "But she'll investigate. And when she finds out it's true, she'll turn on him," Rebecca finished, understanding dawning on her face. For the first time since discovering Madison's betrayal, I felt something close to hope. Not for reconciliation, that bridge was thoroughly burned, but for justice. "We'll need to be careful," I said. "Madison is smart. And dangerous when cornered." Rebecca nodded grimly. "I know my sister better than anyone. And I promise you, Ethan, this time she won't win." The sound of breaking glass jolted me awake at 3 in the morning. For a disoriented moment, I thought I'd dreamed it, until the security system's silent alert buzzed my phone on the nightstand. Someone had triggered the backdoor sensor. My first thought was Madison coming to confront me after the scene at the gym. But Madison had a key, and despite everything, she wasn't stupid enough to break in when she knew about the security system. I slipped out of bed, heart hammering as I grabbed my phone. The security app showed 2 figures at the rear of the house, one tall and broad-shouldered, unmistakably male, and a smaller figure directing him toward the patio door. Even in the grainy night vision feed, I recognized Madison's distinctive gestures. I called 911 immediately, keeping my voice low. "Someone's breaking into my home," I whispered. "2 intruders, 1 male, 1 female. I'm alone upstairs." "Officers are being dispatched," the operator assured me. "Stay in a secure location if possible." I locked the bedroom door and moved to the closet, where I had a better view of my tablet without being visible from the hallway. The security feeds showed Madison and Caleb moving through the kitchen. Madison was pointing urgently toward my home office. Their voices carried through the quiet house, picked up clearly by the system's microphones. "It's in his office," Madison was saying. "The safe behind the bookshelf." "What exactly are we looking for?" Caleb's speech was slightly slurred. "Documents, financial records, the evidence he claims to have." Her voice was sharp, impatient. "And his grandmother's jewelry. It's worth a fortune." I felt a surge of cold anger. The jewelry she mentioned had been left specifically to my future daughter, a daughter Madison had always claimed she wanted eventually. That she was targeting it now revealed the depth of her greed. On the screen they entered my office. Caleb stumbled slightly, steadying himself against the desk. "Are you drunk?" Madison hissed. "Just a little liquid courage," he muttered. "Breaking and entering wasn't exactly on my agenda tonight." "It's technically my house too," she replied, moving toward the bookshelf. "Not according to your husband," Caleb said. "Or the property records he mentioned." Madison ignored him, running her hands along the edge of the bookcase. "Help me move this. The safe is behind it." I watched as they struggled with the heavy oak bookcase. What Madison didn't know was that I'd moved the safe yesterday. It was now in the guest room closet, empty except for some old tax returns. All valuable documents and items were in my brother's possession or my bank's safe deposit box. As they finally managed to shift the bookcase enough to reveal the wall behind it, I heard the distant wail of police sirens. "So did they?" Madison's head snapped up. "Did you tell anyone you were coming here?" Caleb demanded. "Of course not." Madison looked panicked now. Maybe a neighbor saw the broken glass. On the tablet, I watched them freeze in indecision. Caleb moved toward the window. "Those are definitely coming here," he said. "We need to go. Now. We can't leave empty-handed." Madison frantically began pulling books from shelves, searching behind them. "There has to be something we can use." "Madison, we broke into his house. With the restraining order you mentioned, this is serious criminal territory." The sirens were louder now, unmistakably close. I emerged carefully from the closet, still watching the feed. Madison and Caleb were arguing in harsh whispers. "This was your idea," Caleb said. "You promised me there wouldn't be any problems. Just help me find the safe combination. He usually keeps it in his desk." I slipped downstairs, staying out of sight but keeping my phone ready to record. Through the kitchen window I could see the flash of police lights. 2 cruisers were pulling up outside. In my office, Madison was growing desperate. She yanked open desk drawers, rifling through papers. Caleb stood by the door, clearly ready to bolt. "The police are here," he said. "I'm not getting arrested for this." "Don't you dare leave me," Madison snapped. Then, abruptly changing tactics, her voice softened. "Baby, please, help me. If he has those recordings he mentioned, we're both in trouble." Their voices went quiet as heavy knocks sounded at the front door. "Police, open up." I moved to answer it, phone recording everything. 2 officers stood on my porch, hands near their holsters. "I'm the homeowner," I said quickly. "The intruders are in my office." My wife and her boyfriend broke in through the back door. One officer stayed with me while the other moved cautiously through the house, weapon drawn. I heard Madison before I saw her. Her voice had transformed entirely, quavering and tearful. "Officer, thank goodness you're here. I was just coming to get some of my things and my friend came for protection." The officer escorted them into the living room, where Madison immediately began a performance worthy of an Oscar. "This is my house too," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I've been afraid to come alone because of my husband's temper." I stepped forward, phone extended. "Officers, I have video of them breaking the glass door and entering. You can also hear them discussing what they came to steal." Madison's facade cracked. "You were recording us?" I nodded to the small camera visible in the corner of the ceiling. "The security system records everything, Madison. Including your admission that you came for documents and jewelry." Caleb, looking increasingly uncomfortable, took a step away from Madison. "Look, this was her idea. She said this was legally her house too." The officers separated them for questioning. I showed them the restraining order on my phone, then played the damning security footage. Madison's story crumbled further with each piece of evidence. "Sir," one officer said to Caleb, "are you aware a restraining order prohibits Miss Chambers from entering this property?" His face paled. "No. She told me they were just separating informally." Madison was handcuffed first, her protests growing louder as the reality of her situation sank in. Caleb followed, looking shell-shocked and considerably more sober than when he'd arrived. As they were led to separate police cars, Madison turned to glare at me with undisguised hatred. "This isn't over," she called out, the same threat she'd made earlier, but now with an edge of desperation rather than confidence. I watched silently as the police cars pulled away, the flashing lights illuminating my empty driveway in pulses of red and blue. The morning after the break-in, my attorney Janet called with news. "Madison made bail," she said without preamble. "And she's already hired new counsel, Gregory Winters." I recognized the name immediately. Winters had a reputation as an aggressive divorce attorney who wasn't above using questionable tactics. "What does that mean for us?" I asked, pouring my 3rd cup of coffee. I'd barely slept after the police left. "It means she's going nuclear," Janet replied. "Winters specializes in cases where his client has, let's say, compromised themselves. He turns the tables, makes the victim look like the perpetrator." "Can he do that?" "After she broke into my house." "He's already trying. They've filed an emergency motion to freeze all marital assets and remove you from the home." I nearly dropped my coffee. "On what grounds?" "They're claiming you manipulated the security footage, that you set a trap for Madison by telling her to come get her things, then calling the police when she arrived. The absurdity might have been laughable if it weren't so infuriating. I have the restraining order. I have her on video breaking the glass door." "Yes, and that should be enough for any reasonable judge," Janet assured me. "But Winters isn't playing for reasonable. He's playing for doubt and sympathy." 3 days later, I saw his strategy firsthand in the courtroom. Madison was nearly unrecognizable. Gone was the polished, confident attorney I'd lived with for 6 years. In her place sat a timid woman in a modest, slightly too large gray dress, hair pulled back simply, face free of makeup. When she took the stand, her transformation was complete. Her voice, normally commanding and articulate, had become soft and hesitant. "Ethan began changing last year," she told the court, eyes downcast. "Installing cameras throughout our home. Questioning my whereabouts. Checking my phone." Her attorney guided her through carefully crafted questions. "Did you feel safe in your own home?" "No," Madison whispered, a perfect tear sliding down her cheek. "I felt watched. Controlled." "And your relationship with Mr. Morgan?" "Caleb was just a friend who offered support when I felt I had nowhere else to turn." She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Ethan twisted it into something inappropriate because he needed a reason to justify his controlling behavior. I leaned over to Janet. "This is complete fiction," I whispered. She nodded slightly. "We expected this. Trust the process." Madison continued her performance. When I tried to gather some personal belongings, Ethan saw it as an opportunity to have me arrested. To humiliate me. From the corner of my eye, I saw several jurors watching her with sympathy. My stomach tightened with anxiety. When it was our turn, Janet approached the stand with measured confidence. In her hand was a thick folder of evidence. "Mrs. Chambers, you testified that your husband installed security cameras to monitor and control you. When exactly were these cameras installed?" Madison hesitated. "About a year ago." "I have here the installation contract," Janet said, presenting the document. "Dated just 10 weeks ago, after a series of break-ins in your neighborhood. Your signature is on the approval form, is it not?" Madison shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, but..." "And this email," Janet continued, presenting another document, "where you wrote to the security company requesting they add a camera to the back patio specifically. You were concerned about recent thefts, correct?" "That's taken out of context," Madison protested. Janet proceeded methodically, presenting evidence that contradicted each of Madison's claims. Text messages where Madison had told friends she was working late, while security footage showed her with Caleb. Bank statements showing withdrawals from our joint account coinciding with hotel reservations. "Mrs. Chambers, you claim your relationship with Mr. Morgan was merely supportive friendship. Is this you entering the Lakeview Hotel with Mr. Morgan on April 3rd? Janet displayed a clear security image from the hotel. The facade began to crack. Madison's answers grew defensive, then contradictory. When Janet presented the hidden divorce petition with its false abuse claims, Madison's attorney objected vigorously, but the judge allowed it. "Your Honor," Winters argued during a brief recess, "my client was clearly under duress when entering the residence. Mr. Chambers has manipulated evidence to paint her in a false light." The judge, a stern woman in her 60s who had been watching the proceedings intently, fixed him with an unyielding stare. "Mr. Winters, I have reviewed the security footage in its entirety. Your client is clearly heard discussing plans to remove items from the safe and take valuable jewelry. The breaking glass is visible. The restraining order was in effect." She shuffled papers before continuing. "Motion denied. Furthermore, I'm issuing an extended protection order prohibiting Mrs. Chambers from coming within 100 yards of Mr. Chambers or the residence." Winters wasn't finished. "Your Honor, we request supervised access to collect Mrs. Chambers' personal belongings." "Granted, but with court-appointed supervision, not Mr. Morgan." The judge turned to me. "Mr. Chambers, arrange a time when you will not be present. Mrs. Chambers may collect clothing and personal effects only, no financial documents, no valuables unless she can provide clear proof of sole ownership." As we left the courtroom, Madison caught my eye. Gone was the vulnerable facade, replaced by cold fury. She mouthed something that looked like, "You'll regret this," before her attorney ushered her away. "That went well," Janet said as we walked to the parking lot. "It doesn't feel like a victory," I admitted. "She's still determined to destroy me." Janet patted my shoulder. "She's running out of options, Ethan. That's when people like Madison make their worst mistakes." How prophetic those words would prove to be. Life settled into an uneasy rhythm in the weeks following the court hearing. The house felt empty, yet somehow lighter without Madison's presence. I threw myself into work, trying to rebuild the parts of my life that had crumbled under the weight of betrayal. My colleagues were supportive, giving me space while keeping me involved in important projects. My boss, Martin, had been particularly understanding, adjusting deadlines and shifting my workload to accommodate my court appearances. It was Martin who called me late one Wednesday evening, his usually calm voice tight with concern. "Ethan, we need to talk. Something's come across my desk that you should know about." An hour later we met at a quiet bar several blocks from the office. Martin arrived carrying a thick manila envelope, his expression grim. "Someone sent this to HR this morning," he said, sliding the envelope across the table. "Anonymous package, no return address." Inside were printouts of what appeared to be text conversations between me and several female clients. In them, I made increasingly inappropriate comments, eventually escalating to explicit propositions and threats when rejected. "Martin, these are completely fabricated," I said, horror rising in my throat. "I never wrote any of this." "I know," he replied immediately. "The timestamps show you sending these messages during our Tokyo presentation last month. You were on stage with me when half of these were supposedly sent. Relief washed over me. Thank you for believing me. The question is, who would do this? Martin asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. Madison, I said without hesitation. She's trying to destroy my reputation, get me fired. Martin nodded grimly. HR has to investigate, but I've already told them I have doubts about the authenticity. Just be prepared for some uncomfortable conversations. The professional attack was just the beginning. Over the next few days, I discovered Madison had been systematically poisoning my social circle. Friends began treating me with caution, some avoiding me entirely. Eventually, my college roommate Michael called to ask point-blank if I had been abusive to Madison. She reached out to Emma, he explained, referring to his wife. Said she was worried about other women you might hurt and felt obligated to warn people. And Emma believed her? I asked, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. No, Michael said firmly. She thought something seemed off. Madison was too polished about it. Too rehearsed. That's why I'm calling you directly. Through Michael, I learned Madison had contacted nearly everyone we knew, spinning elaborate tales of my supposed controlling behavior and volatile temper. She'd created a Facebook profile under a fake name, positioning herself as an advocate for abused women, and had been sharing anonymous stories that were thinly veiled references to me. I was gathering evidence of this smear campaign when Janet called with disturbing news. We have a problem, she said. A woman named Veronica Taylor reached out to my office. Says she's Caleb Morgan's former business partner. She has information about Madison's plans. I met Veronica at Janet's office the following morning. She was sharp-featured and direct, with none of Madison's calculated charm. Caleb and I ran 3 fitness centers together before he pushed me out 2 years ago, she explained without preamble. We weren't just business partners, we were engaged. Until I found out he was sleeping with at least 4 clients and had drained our business account of nearly $80,000. She placed a flash drive on the table. After I saw his arrest in the paper, I started monitoring his emails. Old habits. He never changes his passwords. She tapped the drive. He and Madison have been plotting how to ruin you. They discuss it explicitly, destroying your career, your friendships, your reputation. Janet picked up the drive cautiously. How did you access these emails? I still have administrator access to the business accounts he uses. Legally dubious, I know, but after what they've tried to do to you? She shrugged unapologetically. Why help me? I asked. You don't know me. Veronica's expression hardened. Because I watched Caleb do something similar to me. He and his previous girlfriend, before me after his second divorce, systematically cut me off from my support network, then came after my professional reputation when I caught them stealing. Sound familiar? We listened as Veronica detailed Caleb's pattern of financial fraud and manipulation. He targeted successful women, used their resources to enhance his businesses, then discarded them, usually after ensuring they would be too compromised or ashamed to effectively fight back. The fitness centers are mostly fronts, she continued. He collects membership fees for services most clients never use, schemes from the payment processing, and uses client credit card information for various schemes. And Madison knows this? Janet asked. Knows it? She's helping him improve his methods. The emails show them discussing how to utilize her legal knowledge to stay just this side of prosecutable. I sat back, processing this information. We need to take this to the police. Janet nodded, already reaching for her phone. I'm calling Detective Rivera. He handled the break-in case. As she stepped away to make the call, Veronica leaned toward me. There's something else. Something not on the drive. What is it? Madison's endgame. She doesn't just want your money or to hurt you. Veronica's voice dropped lower. She wants to make sure you can never recover. In the emails, she talks about making sure you're permanently discredited. That's the phrase she keeps using. A cold dread settled over me. What exactly does that mean? I don't know, Veronica admitted. But whatever it is, based on their communications, it's happening soon. 6 months after discovering Madison's affair, I stood in the county courthouse for our final divorce hearing. The journey to this moment had been exhausting, emotionally, financially, and physically, but the end was finally in sight. Madison arrived with her attorney, Greg Winters, her confidence apparently restored. She wore an expensive suit and walked with the assured posture of someone who expected to win. Her smug smile as she passed me suggested she believed her final attack on my reputation had been successful. What she didn't know was who else would be in attendance. As Madison settled into her seat, the courtroom door opened. Rebecca entered first, followed by Veronica Taylor. Madison's smile faltered at the sight of her sister, then disappeared entirely when she recognized Caleb's ex-partner. "What are they doing here?" she hissed to her attorney. Winters whispered something in response, but their conversation was cut short as the judge entered and called the court to order. "Before we proceed," the judge began, "I should inform all parties that I have reviewed the criminal complaint filed against Ms. Chambers and Mr. Morgan regarding identity theft and financial fraud. While those proceedings are separate, they do inform certain aspects of this divorce case." Madison's face paled. She turned to glare at me, then at Veronica, her composure cracking. The proceedings began with my attorney presenting our case. Janet methodically walked through the timeline of events, backed by irrefutable evidence. Security footage, financial records, Madison's own emails and text messages provided by Rebecca and Veronica. "Your Honor," Janet concluded, "given Ms. Chambers' deliberate attempts to defraud Mr. Chambers, her documented plans to lodge false accusations, and her criminal behavior both during the marriage and after separation, we ask that the court recognize these actions as financial misconduct and rule accordingly." When Madison's attorney presented their case, her strategy had clearly shifted from offense to damage control. Gone were the accusations of abuse and controlling behavior, replaced by attempts to minimize her actions. "My client made errors in judgment during an emotionally trying time," Winters argued. "But the core issues of this divorce remain about equitable distribution of jointly acquired assets." Madison took the stand, attempting to resurrect her victim persona, but it rang hollow now. Under cross-examination, her testimony became increasingly contradictory. "Ms. Chambers," Janet asked, "you previously testified that you feared your husband. Yet in these emails to your sister you describe plans to, and I quote, take him for everything he's worth, and make him sorry he ever met me. How do you reconcile these statements?" Madison stammered through an unconvincing explanation about venting frustrations. As Janet presented more evidence, Madison's responses grew hostile and defensive. At one point she snapped, "You're all against me," before her attorney could object. The judge, who had been watching intently throughout, finally spoke. "I've heard and seen enough. This court will take a 30-minute recess before ruling." In the hallway Rebecca approached me. "How are you holding up?" "Ready for this to be over," I admitted. "Whatever the outcome." She squeezed my hand. "It will be. One way or another." When court resumed, the judge delivered her ruling with unwavering clarity. "This court finds substantial evidence of financial misconduct and deliberate attempts to defraud on the part of Ms. Chambers. The property at 1842 Lakeside Drive, being separately owned by Mr. Chambers through family gift before marriage, shall remain his sole property." Madison's face darkened as the judge continued, awarding me the majority of our investments and requiring Madison to repay funds she had secretly diverted from our joint accounts. "Furthermore," the judge added, "given the documented pattern of vindictive behavior, this court extends the existing restraining order indefinitely." When the gavel fell, finalizing our divorce, a weight lifted from my shoulders. Madison stormed out without looking at me, Winters hurrying after her with a resigned expression. Outside the courthouse, Veronica approached with news. "Thought you'd want to know. The state attorney's office has frozen all assets related to Elite Fitness. Caleb's other locations are being investigated too." "Thank you," I said sincerely. "For everything." "Just paying it forward," she replied with a slight smile before walking away. 1 month later, I stood in the empty living room of what had once been our home, now sold to a young family eager to start their lives in a good neighborhood. The house had too many painful memories to keep, despite winning it in the settlement. My phone buzzed with a news alert: local gym owner and former attorney indicted on multiple fraud charges. The article showed Madison and Caleb being escorted into a police station. According to the report, she was now working as an administrator at a budget motel while awaiting trial, her law license suspended pending investigation. As I drove away from my old life toward my new apartment in a different city, I felt neither joy nor satisfaction at Madison's downfall. Only relief that the chapter was finally closed. The betrayal had changed me, made me more cautious, perhaps, but also more appreciative of genuine relationships. My brother and his family had stood by me. Friends like Michael had sought truth rather than gossip. Even strangers like Veronica had shown more integrity than the woman I had married. Trust would come slowly next time. But there would be a next time. Madison had taken much from me, but not my capacity to hope, to rebuild, to eventually believe in people again. That, at least, was something she could never touch.